Grandpapa snatched him by his throat and dragged him onto our second-floor deck with a gun in his other hand. He leaned in and pointed the gun at my dad's head. "Stop!" I screamed.
It's okay, Mackenzie. This must be extremely difficult for you to talk about. I'm here to help you, so we're going to overcome this trauma by facing it together.
Growing up, the people around me always kept hush when it came to my dad and his sickness. Nobody ever told me what was going on, and that was their biggest mistake. It all started when I was little. The fighting never stopped. My mom and dad would always yell at each other while I begged and pleaded. I would scream, "Stop!" and "Don't yell!" But they wouldn't hear me. Instead, they would yell at me and tell me it was adult stuff. I would cry myself to sleep those nights. It was a year of fighting before they finally got a divorce. I always just thought it was because of my dad smoking. Surely that's what had to make my mom snap, but I later realized it was actually my dad's illness that separated them. When I was in 5th grade, my Nana got diagnosed with cancer for the 4th time. This caused my dad to stop taking his medicine, and it all went downhill from there. Whenever I would see him, he would act really weird. He would tell me how we were being watched and hunted by the government. He also said that he had a friend who was killed by the government because of the secrets he knew, and my dad had to carry on his friend's legacy, so I needed to keep quiet. He even told me that my grandpa was evil, and it was Grandpa's fault that Grandma was sick. It really freaked me out. It didn't occur to me that these were all signs of schizophrenia. You see, one of the tasks of your brain is to make sense of what you perceive. You perceive through your 5 senses: smell, sight, sound, touch, and taste. With schizophrenia, the brain struggles to process all of these perceptions, making people see, feel, hear, and even smell things that aren't even there. The brain also has to make sense of these perceptions. With schizophrenia, the brain turns everyday events into bizarre and often paranoid stories, like being chased by the government. For them, this is a reality. One weekend, I was at Dad's house and I had the flu. It got to about midnight and I was feeling really sick, so I went to find my dad to ask him for some medicine. He started acting really strange and scary. He looked at me with a cold, dull glare. He silently took me by the hand and almost dragged me back to my room. He sat me up on my bed and said in a frightening voice,
Repeat after me.
Then he recited some strange Bible verse that had to do with being kicked out of heaven. I didn't understand what was happening. I asked him to tell me what the verse meant, but that just seemed to make him angry. He started screaming at me over and over, "Say it! Say it!" But I couldn't. Suddenly, he was dragging me down into the kitchen. He stood there at the other end of the room from me and started yelling, "Demon! Demon!" I was so scared. Then he started screaming that God was going to banish me to hell. I took a step closer to him, only to have him scream, "Don't touch me!" I was terrified. I fell to my knees in floods of tears asking my dad, "What did I do?" But he wouldn't listen to my pleas. Luckily, Grandpa was staying with us at the time, and all the commotion had woken him up. He ran downstairs shouting,
What's going on?
When he saw my dad in the state I was in, he grabbed my dad by his shirt collar and dragged him over to the drawer where Dad kept his gun. Grandpa, with his gun in his hand and my dad in his grip, dragged him out of the kitchen onto the balcony. He pushed my dad's head down onto the balcony, pointed the gun at his head, and shouted,
If you ever hurt her, I'll kill you.
"Stop!" I cried out. Grandpa looked over to me and said,
Get your things.
A few minutes later, we were packed, out of there, and driving towards my mom's house. During the ride, Grandpa handed me his phone so I could call my mom. After I did, Grandpa told me the truth about my dad's sickness. He told me that my dad was suffering from schizophrenia. When we arrived at my mom's house, she was crying. She hugged me really tightly and told me that she was sorry for not telling me sooner about how ill my dad was. What I didn't know at the time was that my dad just had a full-blown psychosis, the worst symptom of schizophrenia. In a psychosis, my dad lost touch with reality. It is no one's fault he acted this way. There is no single cause of schizophrenia. So far, we know what factors increase the risk. Both your genes and what happens in life can increase your risk. Suffering from trauma like mine doesn't help at all. Other factors, like taking drugs such as LSD, can also trigger schizophrenia. Taking medications help to suppress the symptoms, and suddenly stopping the medications can then also trigger the disease, which is what happened with my dad. After what happened with my dad, naturally, I was scared of him. I told everyone that I never wanted to see him again. But I knew I had to. After all, he was my dad. So, once he was taking his medicine again, and back to behaving normally, we started seeing each other. It began with me meeting him once a week for an hour, with those meetings always being supervised by my mom. As Dad got better, he asked me to go and stay with him for weekends. I really didn't want to. I was still so scared of him. I'm 15 years old now and in the 9th grade. Although things are better now, I will never look at my dad the same way. I can't build a good bond with him because I'm always a little scared what happened that night could happen again. I know deep inside that it's not his fault, but it's not mine either. All the trauma that I've been through with my dad have resulted in me having an illness too. I suffer from PTSD. I still have nightmares about what happened that night. During the nightmare, I would have to kill my dad before he killed me. I can't even joke around with my mom. If I say something weird, she looks at me as if I, too, might have dad's sickness. It scares me. What if I end up with it? Will I traumatize my future kids like my dad did to me?
That must have been very traumatic for you, Mackenzie.
With illnesses like schizophrenia, we mustn't be afraid to talk about it. Individuals and their loved ones often feel shame and fear to bring it up. This only makes matters worse for those suffering and those around them. Schizophrenia usually manifests during adolescence. So in your teens or 20s, symptoms can be sought out early and taken care of rather than ignored. Early signs are changes in sleeping, trouble thinking clearly, being distracted and withdrawn. As you can see, they are not very specific. Often, everyone apart from yourself, such as friends and family, will notice something is wrong. This is why it is so important that if you know you have an increased risk for developing schizophrenia, you and your social network know the signs. Added stress and trauma to one's life can also trigger the disease, as well as high intake of drugs such as LSD. Make sure you recognize the signs and tell your friends and family what the signs are to get professional help as soon as possible. Because fortunately, there are medications that, if taken daily, can control the disease. Love and support from your friends and family play a huge role to prevent relapsing and getting better.